Ladies and gentlemen, my name is the Porn Reviewer, and welcome to my first ever review. As the first review, with Halloween coming up, I thought it would be festive to record a review College Coeds versus Zombie Housewives from 2015. And we start off this movie with a horribly scripted fight between the cheerleaders and the zombies. And then, after about 2 minutes of that, we get a flashback to 3 days earlier with our main couple, Tracy and her husband, Gary, in bed. And they're just waking up. And Gary just wants to have sex. Tracy just wants to sleep. So Greg says he's going to go work at his lab on a Saturday, mind you. And as he's leaving his house, we get Hank coming over. Hank being Greg's best friend. And, Greg just leaves. And he leaves Hank home alone with Tracy. And that leads into our first sex scene between Tracy and Hank. And here are my thoughts on that scene. Tracy does have great eyes, but she's got an even better ass. And, she'd be even better on Pornhub. But, there was one position done this whole sex scene. Two positions done. And then Hank just finishes in his best friend's wife. All in all, I give it 4 out of 5 faps for that scene. Moving on, Greg's in the lab with his assistant, Marilyn, trying to finalize the sex drug. So, they want to test the sex drug. And so Marilyn and Gary have sex. Moving into sex scene 2, between Gary and Marilyn, all I can think about is how bad Marilyn looks, because she looks just like Charlotte Flair with bigger tits. And the sax in this song was probably the best part of the song. And we keep getting close-ups of the males' asses, and it just really aggravated me. 3 different positions done in this one, and it's 2 out of 5 faps. Moving on, Gary thinks the formula went well and goes to bring it to Tracy. Mary tells us that the formula didn't actually work and she just felt bad for Gary. Moving on, Gary gets home and Tracy and her best friend Carrie are home and they are going for a girls' day out. Gary convinces Tracy to have a drink and he gives Tracy and Carrie the serums, but they don't feel any different. Moving on, Gary and Hank are playing tennis, and Hank tells him that, he's getting it on the regular, because Gary complains he's not getting any. Gary gets home, and there are cheerleaders that are moving in next door, and their names, Judy, Laura, and Kara. They all go to State University, and you can really tell that this is a porn movie. And then they proceed to show Gary their routine. Moving on, Tracy and Carrie joke about trading their husbands, but then they start to feel woozy, and then they start feeling turned on. In our third sex scene, we get Tracy and Carrie. And the whole time, the background music just sounds like a bad cover of Santana's Smooth. And definitely, I don't have much to say about this scene, besides it's the scene that did it for me. 4.5 out of 5 faps. After that sex scene, Tracy and Carrie see Gary flirting with cheerleaders. Marilyn from the lab then calls Steve, who works in a different lab, and Steve tells how the reaction from the drug has a trance-like state, and it makes you a zombie-like and want to go on a killer rampage. Tracy becomes the first victim briefly while playing tennis, and then both girls, Tracy and Carrie, are in and out of a trance-like state. Moving on to the cheerleader's house, as Judy goes out, we get our fourth sex scene between Laurel and Kara. And, you know, I love brunettes, and I love cheerleaders, and I understand why Scissors wins all the time. And that scene was great. The two lesbian scenes in a row were a definite win. And I gave that a 4.5 out of 5 faps. Moving on, Gary finds out about the delayed reaction of the serum. And then Marilyn starts feeling the side effects. Gary then leaves for his wife's cocktail party. Hank, on the other hand, heads to the cheerleader's house. Steve calls. He wants the serum destroyed. He finds out that people have taken the drug. He's not happy. Carrie arrives at the party without Hank. She's not happy. And then we get into sex scene number 5. Hank and the cheerleaders. And I love this movie more and more and more. And I love to be Hank through this whole scene. The triple tower being the best part. And I definitely need to try that at some point. 4 out of 5 faps, folks. Moving on, Mary shows up at the cocktail party, Marilyn. And then Hank shows up. And this is where Carrie finds out he was with the cheerleaders. So Tracy, being the good friend that she is, wants to fight the cheerleaders and starts heading over there. But you know, as she leaves with her husband to go confront the cheerleaders, we've got sex scene number 6, a drunk Marilyn and a drunk Carrie. And the girl who plays Carrie makes a damn good lesbian. And I tell you, Carrie made sex with this Charlotte Flair wannabe actually look pretty hot. I give it 3.5 out of 5 faps. Tracy then admits she overreacted, and her and Gary go home. And then Carrie goes into a trance during tennis with Hank. Moving on, Marilyn and Gary get into an argument about Gary's failing marriage, and Mary goes into a trance halfway through and she just up and leaves. Then back at the cheerleader's house, Tracy trances and heads outside towards them. And here comes a tranced Carrie too. And then Steve arrives with the antidote and tells Gary everything. Gary, Marilyn, and Tracy are all tranced now, and they arrive at the cheerleader's home. But seriously, the acting in these trance scenes is very, very horrible. Like, it's worse than porn bad. And now the zombies and the cheerleaders are having the worst fight scene I've ever seen. And I've seen some bad wrestling in my day. Gary gives the girls mid-fight scene the antidote. And this is where Gary and Carrie find out that Tracy is leaving for Hank. And then Carrie and Marilyn leave together, and Marilyn quits her job on the way out. And in the last sex scene, we get Gary and Judy, who finally get together at the end. And I really need a cheerleader. And, Judy really knows how to ride a guy. This gets 4.5 out of 5 faps. 6 months later, the cheerleaders won their tournament. And that's the end of the movie. Tracy, played by Carly Montana, definitely check her out. Marilyn is played by Mary Carey. That's a horrible name. You don't need to check her out. Judy is played by Erica Jordan. Carrie is played by Christine Nyan. Gary is played by Frankie Dell. Hank is played by Andrew Espinosa Long. Kara is played by one of my favorites, Ariana Chekik, and I'm still in love. Laurel is played by Michelle Maylene. Steve is played by Mike Gaglio. Best name for a porn actor ever. And my final thoughts are this. The acting in the movie was so bad. The only highlights were Adriana Chekik, Carly Montana, and Erica Jordan. The plot really made no sense to me and was resolved way too easily. The sex in most of the movie was good, minus, the Charlotte Flair shit. And other than that, no complaints in that department. Would I recommend? No. The acting was bad, and the actresses, I put air quotes around that, I liked are on Pornhub anyway, so I'm set. My final grade, 3.75 out of 5 faps. That's it for my first review of College Coeds versus Zombie Housewives. And I'm the porn reviewer. And until next time, keep on fapping.